What is shame and where does it come from?
I believe shame can be different for a lot of people, but I think it stems from insecurity, and it also stems from people's values and how they were raised. That's where I think shame comes from.
What is the difference between shame and guilt?
I would say, like, feeling guilty, I would say you know you did something wrong. And then shame is like you feel... Actually, I feel like they're kind of similar. Yeah. It's hard to explain the difference to me.
I think that shame is more of an external force and guilt is more of an internal force. So I think shame is like you need an audience pointing out that you did something wrong, and guilt is more your consciousness telling you, or your morality telling you that you did something wrong. What I think is interesting, though, is that people can kind of shame you into feeling guilty about something. Like, they can let you know you're wrong to the point where you start to feel bad about it. But if you have a sense of guilt and regret about something that you did, and you understand that it's wrong, usually people won't shame you as much for it. So I've always thought that that was interesting, but I've always had a bigger feel of guilt than I do shame, because I try to do things with pure intention. So if I step on somebody's toes, I still have the understanding of my actual intentions. But when it comes to guilt, to know that you're doing something evil and then still do it and regret it and have to deal with it, to me, for the rest of your life, to me, that's just, I don't want that feeling. I don't like guilt.
Why are there people who think we need to bring back shame?
I feel like there are a lot of people who do and say things that they shouldn't, and they don't have shame for it, and then they get themselves into things that they shouldn't. Absolutely. Like, I hear a lot of people say bring back bullying, all that type of stuff. I understand that.
I think people want to bring back shame because they think certain narratives or ideas or expressions of ideas don't fit what they believe.
The people that want to bring back quote-unquote shame, they don't see it as shame. They see it as something that aligns with their values, but not everyone else's, and they think they're right, so that's what I think.
They don't like other people's narratives or expressions of ideas that they do, and shame is a way to kind of make them feel bad for it, make them feel guilty of it, and get them to change or not express those narratives to keep a world shaped more around what they believe and what they enjoy seeing.
Is there anything that deserves to be shamed?
I don't think so.
As long as you're not doing something obviously illegal or like murder, stuff like that, I don't think anything should be shamed. I think people should do what they want.
See, and this is just the idea of like tolerance creeping into Western culture, and what makes Western culture so weak. Unfortunately, it's like this idea that you can do whatever you want as long as you don't negatively affect anybody. But that's just not realistic, because unfortunately, a society is only going to be as good as the sum of the decisions the people in that society make. And we use shame as a tool to deter people from doing certain things that we don't use capital punishments for. So there's like punishments like going to jail or like getting the death penalty. We use those for like strict laws. But then there's shame. We have social contracts of things you shouldn't do because we want to make the world, or at least our country or our community, a better place. So we don't want you doing those things. Like, I don't know if a woman should get arrested for sleeping with another man when she's in a marriage, but she should definitely get shamed for it. To say that is just absurd to me. Like, say something for like shoplifting. Like shoplifting, there is a legal punishment, but you could say that there isn't anybody harmed in that act. But at the end of the day, if you keep shoplifting, or enough people start shoplifting because there's no harm, no foul, the basic consumer that actually pays for their goods have to carry the load for what you're doing. So it does affect other people. And that's just something that we can't get away from in society. It's just kind of like the curse of humanity. You depend on other people no matter what those people are like, so you expect those people to be more just, and we use shame as a mechanism for social contracts so that people get in line without needing capital punishment.
If something makes you happy and it doesn't hurt anybody else, it's whatever. And some people, that could be argued with religions, look down on other religions or other cultures or beliefs in a similar sense, but more so like, I don't like that. I'm never going to raise my kids. I'm going to shelter them from it. And I'm going to shame them if they do that, or shame other people in front of them to kind of build that so they don't ever do it. And
also, people forget about the physical consequences of some of the things that we've shamed throughout human history. Like, the reason why you shame female promiscuity is because viruses like wet, warm areas. So women tend to be the carriers of viruses. And pregnancy was always a dangerous thing, so you wouldn't want your daughter to get pregnant by some random guy and risk her life. And we don't even know who the baby father is before DNA tests. So because of the physical consequences of sleeping around, female promiscuity was shamed because women bear the burden of promiscuity. Like also for like viruses. Like syphilis would wipe out entire communities, entire civilizations, entire towns, entire kingdoms. So because everybody don't want to die, you're gonna get shamed if you're the town 304. That's just how it works. So that shame was just a social mechanism to challenge people and to keep them in line, because we have to work together to build societies as humans. We just have to.
Shame people.
What is the purpose of shaming people in a multicultural country full of religious freedom?
I believe there's no point, because if there are multiple people from multiple different backgrounds, shaming somebody not knowing where they come from or how they were raised is kind of pointless.
I think it's negative. There's no point in doing it. And some people want to uphold their views or their values and don't like others. If everyone could stay in their own lane and not shame everyone, it would be great. But that can't happen, just because the way we were raised makes us have a negative outlook on certain things regardless.
At what point does shaming infringe on the freedom of others?
When it becomes harassment, when it's assault, when it's just you're being bombarded by it. And of course, some cultures, not like myself, of course, experience it a lot more for different reasons, for their skin color, just being shamed for what they believe in, if they like a weird anime or art form.
When it impacts their decision making. So if the pressure of shame from society causes you to do or be something outside of what you want to be in your free will.
Didn't gay people have to fight to not be shamed by religious people?
Absolutely they did. And it's still prevalent now, but it's far less than it used to be. And I think they're far more accepted by religions and religious communities, at least here in my world. Of course, you're never going to fight a battle like that, shame. You're never going to take over the world with it, just because people are so rooted in their values and their ways. And it's not easy to break out of that. So they did have to fight, and I think they will fight, and every other group, small or large, is going to always have to fight to not be shamed. And I think that's what gives them a sense of community.
How can a father stop his daughter from having an OnlyFans any more than he can stop his son from being gay?
Being gay is not a choice.
That one's actually simple. If you stop masturbation, you stop being gay.
Facts.
I mean, obviously with
That's facts.
OnlyFans, you have to be a
And
certain...
a lot of people don't know this, but there are actually more people that have converted out of being gay on the planet currently than there are actual gay people on the planet currently. So while it may be an extended phase for some people, generally speaking, and I'm not trying to do blah, 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 generally speaking, though, for most people, they convert out of it later in life, and that's just a fact. I mean, you can't really deny that. So,
certain age, once you get that certain age, it would be wise, I think, to take some opinions from your father, because that is your father and his opinion does deserve a little bit of respect. But at the end of the day, it is your choice.
Who are the bigger slut shamers, men or women?
I would say men are the bigger slut shamers versus women.
Men are probably the biggest slut shamers, because a dude can sleep with 20 girls and he's a stud, but a girl doesn't, she's a hoe.
Men love sluts, women hate them.
I mean, me personally, I'm old-fashioned. I want a girl who's pure, so someone who hasn't been around the whole block. I feel like, especially in nowadays and age with the way the world is going with OnlyFans and all that, I don't want my kid to grow up in a way where they go to school and their mom is slut-shamed because she's naked all over the internet.
That's facts.
And I feel like that comes with the connotation of a body count.
Why are there men who will shame women for having high body counts while also complaining about how hard it is to get laid?
Right? I feel like men don't know what they want. I feel like at one moment they act like they want a good girl, but in reality they want a bad girl. Even if they get a good girl, they're still gonna make the good girl feel like stay good, but then they'll still be giving the bad girls like all this attention. So it makes the good girl feel like she should just be bad. Like,
yeah, well, that's only if you're a woman that values attention over your virtues, like being nice, being wise, being kind, being honorable, having integrity, discipline. Like, if you're a woman that values attention over those virtues, those intangibles, those things we like to ignore and act like they don't exist or they're not important, then you're going to fall into that trap. And a lot of those women that value the attention over their own virtues, they end up alone anyway. All those girls with the big booty BBLs, majority of them girls are single anyway. They get all the likes in the world, but they're not getting any of the results, because just because you're getting attention doesn't mean that you are what a man wants to commit to. But also with the question, I'm not sure if men ever really complain about not being able to get laid. Even incel guys that I see, I don't really see them complaining that they're not getting laid. I see men complaining that there are no good girls around to make commitments to because they've all been ran through, which is the first part of that question. I can understand why men are complaining about men or about women sleeping around because we don't want to commit to a woman that is very promiscuous for a lot of reasons. One of them is because they're statistically more likely to divorce you. They're going to be less happy in the marriage over a shorter period of time. There's a lot of issues that come along with a woman that's been around the block that you got to deal with in the long run. And we know instinctually it questions paternity. But as far as men complaining that they don't get laid enough, I don't really see that. Even amongst incel crowds or involuntarily celibate crowds, they seem to be more complaining that they can't find a good girl that or find a woman that wants them. So, so it seems more like a girlfriend type of deal. Like they'll settle. They're not like wanting to be playboys. They're fine with just having one girl. They just want one girl. They want something. So yeah, I don't really see the complaint of men saying, well, I'm not getting laid enough. I don't really see that.
How does it make sense to shame men for being incels at the same time we're shaming women for high body counts?
I mean, it really don't make sense because it's the same thing. It's just different genders, but it's the same thing. Like,
incels attack women in a sense of you're a slut, you're this, you're that. And I think it comes from them not being able to attain a woman in the sense that they want to attain them.
Most incels don't really get to deal with women because they don't have that confidence to approach them and deal with them in a way they want to. But with a woman with a high body count, it's a different stance because her value comes from that. Her value comes from her being able to give her vajayjay away. And if she's giving it out too much, shit, you don't want to drive a car that got 100,000 miles on it, 200,000 miles on it, and it's a Lambo. Shit, I'd rather get the brand new Lambo straight off the lot with no miles instead of the one that's used.
Yeah, see, and this is another weirdly phased question because I don't really see men shaming incels, like involuntarily celibate men. I don't see men shaming them. Now, I see men trying to give them tactics as a way to get to their goal, or if they want to sleep with women to help them out with their confidence or try to sell them a course maybe, but I don't really see men shaming other men for being incels. I see more women calling men that as an insult, that and gay, right? That's they two go-tos. If you say anything against what a woman believes, you either never had none or you like men. That's always the conclusion they come to, but that's just a shaming tactic. I don't really ever see men complaining or shaming other men for being incels. Now, I see men shaming men for being simps. I see that. And that's just because you're just kind of depleting your own value by giving this woman everything you have while she reciprocates nothing. That's the definition of simping to me. Giving a woman all you got, but she's reciprocating nothing in return. And I just think that that's unjust by and large. And I do think it's cowardice for you to do that and not stand up for yourself when you do want something from that woman. I think that's just cowardice. So, and men don't respect cowardice, and we never will. I don't care how much money you got. If you don't stand up for yourself in certain situations, men aren't going to be able to respect you. If you end up in a situation where your girl get disrespected and you ain't willing to do nothing, or your daughter get disrespected and you ain't willing to do nothing, and you could have done something in that situation, it don't matter how much money you got, you won't be respected by men because we'll consider you to be a coward. And if you let a woman walk all over you and take from you without putting your foot down and expecting anything in return, at the bare minimum, an intangible expectation like respect, then you're just not going to get the respect of men. So it just is what it is.
Why has the entire red pill become about slut shaming and beta male shaming?
Why has it become that? I would say that's because those are the most polarizing topics, and it's, the easiest way to sort of, I'd say we live in an engagement world, and those are the ones that are the easiest to get engagement of for the topics that people feel very strongly one side or another, to where they love to talk about it, to where that's now what the red pill conversation has become about, when in actuality it's a lot more than that.
A lot of these podcasts now have turned to that. There were good podcasts back there that were quote unquote alpha male. I think a lot of them do have good values, but I think now it's become kind of a trend to downplay people and kind of bully people, so they use it to their advantage.
Why are they more focused on shaming men and women back into traditional roles versus liberating men from being traditional?
Why do they want to do that? That's a great question. I would say that
because men want women to do all the stuff that we used to do a long time ago, and they need to do the stuff that they used to do a long time ago.
But are women willing to do the things that they used to do a long time ago?
Not a lot of these bitches, no.
That's
So
fair.
then why should men be held to a traditional standard?
I guess they should not. Let me go back.
That's fair. Admit when you're wrong.
I would say I believe it's because it's most beneficial for them to have us in those roles as opposed to having us, in the words of being liberated. I'd say that that's not what they want. So they want to keep us in a traditional role, feeling shame, things of that nature.
Well, traditional roles are probably better for men and women because it seems like women have fallen apart. They try to be the men, and it's not working out.
What is the point of shaming people who clearly have no shame?
There's honestly no point. If they enjoy what they're doing and they're not harming anybody, there's no point.
What value does shame have if there's no consequences?
Ooh. Again, I think that's just an issue with people's values.
No, humans are social beings. Don't get this mistaken. Humans are social beings, so the consequence or the authority is in the shame. The consequence is you getting shamed by your peers. That is, trust me enough. That's actually, I believe it was in Peru or somewhere. They were having major traffic issues, like crazy fatalities from people just walking across the street and getting mowed over by cars, right? So what they try to do, the first thing they try to do is hire a bunch of police officers to just hand out tickets. And people would just get the tickets and just pay the tickets and keep going. But the fatality rate for people walking across the street and getting mowed over didn't go down. But then I guess, I don't know if they got a president, prime minister, I'm not sure what they got down there, but whoever was the leader at the time decided to put in mines, like the literal mines, like black and white doing the whole I'm inside the box thing, like literal mines, so that when people walked across the street, the mines would just point at them as they violated the traffic violations. And I guess the traffic violations decreased by like 80% in a year. So the shame, just the shame of the mines pointing them out and saying you're doing something wrong in front of all of their peers, even people that they didn't even really know like that, that were just walking down the street alongside them, that was enough to deter people from getting mowed over by cars. So shame is a very powerful tactic. And even if it doesn't have enforcement by the law, the fact that your peers are ridiculing you, to a lot of people can't handle that. Like that takes a lot. And you can see that happening now with pop culture. There are literally certain things you can't say or people won't say because they're afraid of being shamed by their peers. It's a very powerful tool.
Why has religion been imposed as part of the men's masculinity movement, and what's the connection?
I think religion is a man-made social construct, which, helps with the patriarchy and whatnot. A lot of the men are put higher.
I think that's definitely pushed by the religious people to make because there are things as, what are they called? Like men's roles and women's roles. And for religion, at least, the man's role is to provide care and protect. And a woman's role is to cook, clean, and do the other stuff, take care of the kids. And I think that has a big part in religion. So I think they use that to kind of get people on their side.
You're automatically more masculine if you're in Christ and you give your life and you have Christ in you, so it's a different thing. But when it comes to religion, I'm not a religious person, so I wouldn't know.
You can take a whole bunch of different religions, and the man is elevated, like, and superior to the woman. Like you take Islam or several other religions, Hinduism, they elevate the man above the woman. A lot of times you'll notice that the women walk in the back for different reasons of different cultures, but it shouldn't be like that according to Bible standards.
Well, this is going to be a little bit of a hot take, and it might take me a little bit to get this out, but I personally believe that the reason why Christianity and other religions are always written in the masculine is because, one, men have a higher duty and a higher responsibility to be moral, and two, it's because, and this is why it's always written in the masculine. There's always he whoms or whatever it may be. But it's always men leaders, women in the back, and you're trying to preach morality to the men because of the second reason that I was going to say is when men are immoral, there are bigger consequences to society. When you talk about a Genghis Khan that literally wiped out 10% of the population, changed the carbon footprint of the planet, Genghis Khan did. Wiped out 10% of the population. I need people to understand it. They finished the Great Wall of China to stop this guy from getting through. The Great Wall of China is 13,000 miles long. For context, From LA to New York is about 2,500 miles. So LA to New York and back about 3 times is the length of the Great Wall of China, and that's what they did to stop this man from killing more people. I mean, he was brutal. So that's what happens. That's the extent to where when masculinity becomes immoral, how far we can go with it. Whilst women tend to be a little bit more benign and they tend to be more controlled by the society around them using shame. So it's just a way to get men to understand their position, and they want, and honestly, a big part of religion that we've kind of lost. And people can argue, you know, I believe that the red pill and religion have a lot of things in common. If you go listen to The Crucible with Andrew Wilson, he's been all over the place. He's been at the Whatever podcast. He's been at Fresh and Fit. He's been having good conversations. If you listen to a guy named Nolan Knows on YouTube, these guys, there are literally distinct parallels between red pill and Christianity. The biggest difference that I see personally is the red pill tends to focus on more of the material, which I personally believe is more inherently feminine, because I believe materialism takes you away from your masculine duty and it makes you softer because you get used to the comforts of materialism. While Christianity tries to take you away from those tangible things, those materialist things, and puts you into more of a higher brain where you're thinking about the intangibles like honor, duty, integrity, like things like that. I think personally where the church went wrong and where they lost a lot of men is when they became weak. When being a Christian just became another title, like being a man, being a woman. Everything's just what you identify as. It came with no sense of duty or no sense of what you had to do to earn that title. You used to at least have to go to church to be considered a Christian. When I started growing up, people stopped going to church and was doing the same things as the people that they considered themselves better than, but would still call themselves Christian. And when the patriarchy of Christianity failed to call that out and stand their ground against certain moral aspects, that's when they lost the respect of men. And that's when men kind of started to check out. Because again, if you're cowardice, if you start to back up, if you start to back down because you're afraid of whatever the consequences may be and you don't stand your ground, men aren't going to respect you. And I think that's what happened to Christianity. There's no duty that comes with the title of being a Christian anymore. You don't got to pray. You don't got to know anything about the Bible. You don't even got to go to church. It's just a virtue signaling tool for people who want to consider to be better than other people without doing any work involved in it. They started to use ideologies like turn the other cheek in the wrong way. So when Jesus was talking about, in Matthew, when Jesus was talking about turning the other cheek, he's not saying turn the other cheek as a way of being passive anytime people challenge you. That's not what it's about. Accepting anything, tolerance. It's not about, turning the other cheek is not about tolerance. It's about defiance. Imagine if somebody punched me in the face right now and I turn the other cheek and go, what else you got? You don't like what I'm saying? What else you got? That's an act of defiance. That's an act of standing your ground for what you believe in. Those are the masculine parallels that men need to get in line with something like Christianity, but it became too feminine, and men aren't going to respect the feminine institution that's supposed to be for the greater good of men. Also, the last point that I want to make about this is the reason why it's written in the masculine also is because when you help men, you help the whole society. When you help women, you just help women. You don't help men, you don't help children, you don't help families, and you're probably working against the better interests of the entire nation that you're in, to be quite honest. Because, the women are probably going to prioritize themselves. But when you help men, you help everybody.
Jesus is the head of the house or the head of the church, and then the man is the head of the house and the woman is below him. But as far as that goes, the message can be misconstrued due to how men portray it, because they want to be dictative or they want to make it seem like they want power over the woman, when really it's a respect thing. You don't want your woman to disrespect you in the way that she moves. If you don't agree with something, you want her to respect your wishes or the way you think, just like she would want you to do the same. It's all based on respect.
Do you believe in the God, man, woman, child hierarchy? And if so, should everyone be held to that standard when we're trying to promote gender equality?
Yes, but gender equality means male and female.
Men that lead the family and kept the family together and focused on God and stuff like that. I didn't feel like that was a bad idea. I feel like now that we don't have that, this is the society that we have. I mean, a lot of fatherless people, a lot of people just not knowing the way. I feel like men are it's a beautiful thing to be masculine, but in this society it's not cool anymore. So
yeah, gender equality is fake. It's not real. Feminists only tend to talk about gender equality when it benefits women. They never talk about it when it affects men ever. They don't care. If men were to take on feminine roles, society would completely collapse. Everybody knows this. It's kind of the unspoken rule. Also, men would be absolutely miserable if they started to take on the feminine role. We would not be happier that way. Men tend to get a lot of fulfillment when they can protect and provide for their families. So yeah, it ain't gonna. Gender equality was always just a shit test by women so they could escape their duties of being women. They don't want to be homemakers. They don't want to be wives. Some of them, of course. They don't want to give birth to children. So they want to switch back and forth between the roles of men and women and have that fluidity. And that's why the idea of gender equality came into play. But to be quite frank, the people who want gender equality don't want real gender equality because it would mean the collapse of all of society. Men have to do masculine roles in order for society to run. That's just the nature of the beast.
So why are all men being blamed for the patriarchal structure that religion is trying to push?
I think that's an unfair blame on men because I think the patriarchal society caused by or created by religion goes way deeper than just men.
We shouldn't be blamed by that. That is a hypocritical stance by the religious, sects, due to the fact that they have an agenda to push too, because they're trying to control the masses through the things that they teach. So even if to a certain extent that is true as far as it can help the family environment in a way, it shouldn't be the precipice for what we want to stand on, due to the fact that it's coming from organizations and institutions that don't have our best interests at heart.
Trying to utilize traditional foundations against us, a lot of people, I won't say everyone, but a lot of people grow up with a religious background, so it's easy to kind of use that source as a shaming point, I would say.
Doesn't that give them a license to condemn masculinity if it doesn't fit their definition?
100%, absolutely.
Why don't we shame gays for not being masculine enough, the same way we shame straight men for not being masculine enough?
I would say because it's an assumption that gay men are more feminine, which in reality is not true. Sexuality and masculinity or femininity are completely unrelated, but we feel like it's okay to assume that gay men are naturally more feminine, when that's not the case. But we feel.
Nah, that's cap. That's cap. If you taking Johnson, you more feminine than me. I don't care. And by and large, gay folks just tend to be more feminine. And I never understood that, because I never understood why, if you like men and you like men who like men, why do you want to look like a woman? Why do you need the woman face in order to try to get the men that you want? If you a man that like men, you could just like men and be a regular man. You don't got to try to be a woman to like men. So I've never understood that. But to say that gay men aren't more feminine, that's why we don't expect it. They're gay guys. They you know what they do, right? Ain't nobody going in the back door. So they got a whole different lifestyle. I lead them people to do whatever they want to do, those guys, and shout out to them if that's what they want to do, but it ain't got nothing to do with me. But to say that the average gay man is just as masculine as the average man, that's just not real. That's not real.
Comfortable making those assumptions.
I think that nobody should be shamed in who they are. I don't think that straight men who act more feminine need to be shamed, and I don't think that gay men who act very feminine or very masculine need to be shamed either.
Who is more controlled by shame, men or women, and why?
Ooh, who is more controlled by shame? I feel like women. Definitely. Women are more controlled by shame because, like if you live or dress a certain type of way, it's kind of like, bro, like you deserve it, or you shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't. Yeah, but men kind of, that's what a part of being a man. Like, that's what they do. They get a pass. When I actually think that men have a lot to do with the way that women are now, but they'll complain, oh, you're like this and you're like that, or you're a whore or whatever, but you kind of wanted that whore. You wanted a whore. You know what I'm saying? Like, you wanted me to be a freak. You wanted me to be wild. You wanted me to be a slut, but like, I'm getting shamed for it. I don't even get it, but whatever.
No, and I will say this about what she's saying right now. That's just something you got to understand about the duality. There's a duality. If you want a good valued, you know, she got good values, morality, discipline, all these different things, she probably ain't gonna be jumping off the top bunk and landing on your Johnson. I'm sorry. Those are two different types of women. It's like those women that say, I want a 6-foot tall thug that likes to go carry a gun but take long walks on the beach. You know how women say that unrealistic BS? When guys think that they're gonna get a girl that's a genuinely good, valued woman, and assume that she ain't gonna cry a lot. That's gonna come with it. With the femininity, she's gonna cry a lot. She's gonna expect a lot. And if she's a good woman, she ain't gonna be doing double backflips off the top bunk. This is not gonna happen. So I understand what she's saying, but if you're that kind of guy, you just gonna have to figure out which one you want, because the woman that's doing all them tricks, she learned them somewhere, and it ain't from you. Okay, so that's gonna come with its own battles. But if you want a woman you can start from scratch with, teach her things, she still ain't gonna be able to go as immoral sexually as some of the dudes who be watching all this pornography probably want to go. But she'll be willing to do some things with you if she really values you as a man. But she ain't probably gonna be the one that's doing the double backflips off the top bunk. So either you want the double backflips or you want a nice home cooked meal from a virtuous woman that's ready to raise children. Those are two totally different women. Usually.
Don't women often wear shame as a badge of honor?
I feel like it depends on the woman, because me, I don't like feeling shameful. I like to be free of shame if possible. So it definitely depends on the woman. I feel like all of us are not the same. We got a whole lot of going on in this world. So
Isn't there more weight attached to shaming men because they haven't been liberated like women?
Ooh, more weight attached to shaming men. I would agree with that. I feel like men get shamed a lot, and women are kind of like, oh, yep, there's no shame in it. Let's be proud about our life. So damn, yeah, it's true. Guys do get shamed a lot more than women do.
Isn't there more weight attached to shaming men because they haven't been liberated like women?
No, men have been liberated longer than women have.
Didn't we have a women's liberation movement? We haven't had a men's liberation movement.
You guys have that.
Can you explain that? What do you mean?
Well, you know, hundreds of years ago, we were not able to get jobs, we couldn't wear certain things, so we had to have that act of liberation to then be where we are now.
100 years ago, the average work week was 70 hours a week. I don't know very many women that want to work 70 hours a week in an industry or in a time before modern medicine, where if you get a cut on your arm, you might as well cut the arm off and throw it in a ditch. I don't know very many women that wanted to work in those circumstances. And this was before Social Security. People have to understand that as you got older, you didn't have any Social Security. So you had to have kids through your early teens to your 20s when you were fertile so that they could work the farm when you're dying. Right? So people have families of 8 or more. So I don't know how you're going to have these families of 8 or more work 75 hours a week on average as a woman, including Sundays or Saturdays and Sundays. I don't know very many women that would have signed up for that, even currently. Now that we got AC and pizza parties, we can all look in retrospect and say men bad for that. But to be quite frank, many women didn't want to go into those positions. And to be quite frank, many women didn't want to vote. I know that's crazy to hear, but many women didn't want to vote because it came with the responsibility of going to war. And actually, when the female vote got passed, it was only men that voted for the female vote to get passed. Ain't that crazy? So ain't that a coincidence? Ain't that irony? But like when people go into retrospect and just complain how women were all like just held down and tied to a stove, that's not reality. Women have always been influential in agriculture. Women have always worked. Women have always knitted things, sewed things, had a bunch of kids, gossiped with their girlfriends while they're working the fields. This is what it's always been. This is nothing new. And now that we're in this new day and age, you got women that completely don't want to work anymore. And there was no time in human history where women did absolutely no work. They were always helping on the farm. They were always cooking. Before washing machines, you had to wash clothes by hand. You had 8 kids. You raised them in a village with your girlfriends. Y'all talked shit all day and grew fucking stuff out of the ground. This is what people did. So these narratives that, like, they never mentioned the fact that women weren't allowed to have bank accounts because they weren't allowed to accrue debt. They never talk about that. So a woman could go and get credited for something, but her father would be responsible for the debt. And when she got married, her husband would take on all of the debt. And if the debt wasn't paid, if her debt wasn't paid, the husband would be sent to jail on her behalf. They don't talk about that.
Now, men already had that.
aren't men typically held to a traditional standard that we have to be protectors and providers in relationships?
Yes.
That's not liberated. That means we are held to a standard. Women,
True.
you can tell a man he's not a real man if he doesn't protect and provide, but you can't tell a woman she's not a real woman if she doesn't cook and clean. Do you see the difference?
I feel like it still happens.
What do you mean?
Oh, there we go.
I mean, there's shame from everywhere in both ways. Like, you can shame a man for not being a provider and protector, but you can also shame a woman
Let's
for
be
not
honest
cooking
here.
and cleaning. It happens on both ends, I'd say.
Well, yeah, but women. Okay, but there's no real consequences for it, though. That's the thing. Because a woman could be a career woman or a stay-at-home mom, and it's acceptable either way. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's socially acceptable, but it's not a socially acceptable. A man is seen as less of a man if he doesn't protect and provide. You see what I mean? You don't think so?
Not really.
Men didn't need to be liberated. They were always the ones in control.
Well, then why are men more held to a traditional standard than women?
Because toxic masculinity, I think a lot of men hold each other to a higher standard of that type of traditional role than women do to themselves.
I would say men are more controlled by shame because
So you don't think that your woman, that my woman ain't gonna hold me to a standard of protecting her if something happens? You don't think my woman gonna be the one to expect me to go answer the door if somebody knocking at the door at 3 a.m.? That's just crazy. And I would expect her to expect those things from me. It's natural. But to act like women don't have those, you're not even gonna get a woman nowadays if you can't provide as a man, damn near. It could be Jesus Christ walking down the street, and he at 5'2", when Jesus was like 5'2" to 5'4", he ain't gonna get no women in modern times. He ain't had no money, and he Kevin Hart height. Let's just be honest. It ain't even about the virtues. It's about how much you can provide at this point, and somewhat of how much you can protect. And to act like women don't enforce that amongst the men that by picking the men that they pick is crazy. Women will literally pick taller men and say it's because I just feel more protected. That's a masculine role that you're enforcing.
to your point, women sometimes own their shame and maybe wear it as a badge of honor, kind of take back the negative feelings of shame. Whereas men, I don't think we've gotten there yet to where with shame we truly feel that. So I think we're more controlled by that.
Why is shaming women seen as hate, but shaming men is seen as motivation?
Like I said, I think women are pretty emotional creatures. That's not to bag on women. It's a thing. Women react more emotionally and men are more logical. Not saying that women are any less and smarter, but yeah, that's why.
Why would it be any more acceptable for one religion to impose their morality over another?
I simply don't think it is. I think everybody deserves to say what they want to say, but I think when you start shoving it down somebody's throat, that's where you're wrong.
Why would it be any more acceptable for Christians to impose their morality than it would be for Muslims to impose Sharia law?
I think that's a perspective thing, because I know a lot of people, especially in the West, see the Sharia law and they don't agree with it. And I personally don't. I think it's a lot of the laws that they have against women are pretty bad. But it's the same thing from their point of view. They look over here and see that it's fine to be gay, and I know it's against their religion. So I think it's just the way that people look at it.
Yeah, well, that's part of it, though. Like, a lot of people don't understand the reason why the Islamic rule is always so just like masculine and patriarchal is because if you look at the Eastern world and you look at the Middle East in particular, they're in a war-torn zone. Like, throughout all of human history, that zone has just been at war all the time. And when countries are at war or during hardship, you rely more on the patriarchy or on the masculine, and the masculine is going to enforce those religious rules to try to bring more peace and more order and more structure amongst the chaos. While in the West, especially in the U.S., we're very secluded. We have a very rich land, and these are things we take for granted. If you travel the rest of the world as a Westerner, you'll see how bad the rest of the world is. But we're secluded. Our only enemies, or the nearest boundaries, are the war countries that we would have to go, the countries we have to go to war. Canada, Mexico, pretty peaceful place to be. So we're allowed to be more tolerant and allow our culture to be more accepting and feminine and all these different things. And we've had time to grow because we're secluded. But if you look at them countries where they enforce them Sharia laws and all them strict laws against women and the patriarchy is very strong, those are countries where it's been war throughout all of human history. And this is why Eastern countries like over on that side always got those types of vibes, as people would say. Yeah, it's crazy.
You can't force religion onto somebody. Religion is a faith. Religion is a belief. It's not something that you can just be like, oh, this is my opinion, so now it's yours.
If the Bible holds men more accountable than women, how are religious conservatives any better than the feminists who always blame men?
I don't believe they are. I believe it's one and the same.
So,
And that's why Christianity does not put men on a pedestal, because Christianity also holds men more accountable than they do women. So while it comes with more privileges, quote unquote, it also comes with more responsibility, and that just makes sense to me. So it kind of contradicts the point he was making earlier, where they're talking about, you're putting men on a pedestal using religion. Well, you also give them significantly more responsibility, and you hold them accountable for the results, even things that they can't control. Like if you're seen as weaker as a man if your wife doesn't listen to you. You can't really control that per se. You could do things, to inspire her to be better at that, but you can't really control what your wife does. But other men will look at you as lesser than if you don't have control over your household. That's just how it works. So
the Bible does hold man to a higher standard because he's supposed to be the protector, the defender of the home. Women, feminism, it's kind of like they took over part of the man's role of being the protector of the house instead of being the caretaker and the one that also helps show the man, hey, did you see this? Did you see that?
I know I'm stopping this a lot, but I wanted to say this too. Feminism does not make women masculine. It makes women something else. It makes it evil. It's not even a masculinity where you have a sense of duty of protection. Because what he's saying is that women have taken on the protector role, and that just hasn't happened. The only thing that women have done, and have done it to religion too, is take away all of the duty and responsibility of what is considered a woman's duty and responsibility. Like, men still have our original duties, things that we have to do to be considered good men, but what is a woman expected to do to be considered a good woman in society? What is she expected to do? Other than help herself and prioritize her own happiness at this point. She's not expected to cook. She's not expected to clean. She's not expected to give you kids. She's not expected to stay loyal in the marriage. She's not expected to not even break up her own family. What is the female duty at this point? That's what feminism has done, is just alleviated women from female duty. It hasn't given them any masculine responsibilities at all. You give a woman $1 million, she'll just have no kids. And she'll go live on a beach and try to drink margaritas and just gain 300 pounds. You give a man $1 million and he wants to help everybody around him if possible. That's just the difference. So it doesn't, that type of masculine, it doesn't make women even masculine. I think we just say that as a buzzword so you can understand that they become more combative and aggressive and a little bit more ruthless, but it doesn't really give them the humility or the discipline and the responsibility and the honor, the integrity. Those are the things, like the masculine virtues, those don't come with it. So
if religious conservatives view freedom in the highest regard, why aren't they willing to accept those who want to step outside their traditional roles?
Traditional roles, you mean biblical roles? If you were to step outside of the biblical role, it ultimately shows a false pattern of what God has intended for man.
Because I think the viewpoint that conservatives view freedom in the highest regard is false. I think that's what they like to paint as their narrative, but I think in reality, you see the fact that you guys don't truly want freedom. You want people to be underneath a set of rules as opposed to doing what they feel comfortable with and what they feel is right.
What is the difference in the shame that comes from a feminist versus the shame that comes from a religious conservative? Aren't they both attempts to control and force their ways upon others?
Well, one's out of love, the other one's out of selfishness. See,
Bingo.
You see somebody drowning in sin,
that's heat.
You try to help that person. You know what I mean? Another one is about, shaming somebody for being themselves instead of what they do.
What's the difference between feminists labeling anything they don't like as misogyny versus religious conservatives labeling anything they don't like as degeneracy?
Okay, well, I think that there is a difference in, sometimes people just use it as a cop-out method where they're like, oh, I don't like this, so I'm going to label it as something bad. But I also think that when it comes to misogyny, there is a much more underlying, it's there and people are just calling it out, versus when I think degenerates, I think people are just looking for a reason to hate on younger people and somebody doing something different than themselves.
Aren't they both coming from a self-righteous ideology?
100%. I'm not saying I support it. I'm just saying that's what I think.
So why does shame exist in a multicultural country of religious freedom?
I mean, I would say first, even though we live in a multi-religion country where you have a ton of different viewpoints, I would say we still, at least in the United States of America, live in a predominantly Christian society to where Christian views are still, to this day, what's considered norm. Obviously, we have a ton of religions, a ton of diversity, but Christianity still being the primary religion associated with the United States. But in terms of why we still have shame, I would say that you have hypocrites. You have hypocrites in all religion, and you have, even going down to atheists, non-believers, you have hypocrites that their viewpoint is more important than the viewpoints of their religion. And even if we get to a historical standpoint, there's a ton of hypocrisy in almost all religions that still exist.
What's the difference between the shame that comes from a feminist versus the shame that comes from a religious conservative? Aren't they both attempts to control and force their ways upon others?
I think they are, but I think that there's a difference in... Actually, there's not much of a difference. I think...
No, there is much of a difference, and even if you want to have the idea of utilitarianism or the idea that you should do whatever it takes to make the world a better place, it's always going to fall on more religious values, because religious people have more children. On the happiness index, they tend to be more happy. They tend to have less divorces, keeping their families together. They tend to make more money in the long run throughout their lifetimes. They tend to be more happy, more healthy. While feminists tend to not have any children, they tend to ruin their marriages if they do have children with a family. They tend to be more selfish. Almost all of the charity that's given out in the world is done through the church. I think it's like 95% of all charity done in the world is done through the church. So whether that be Christian, Islam, or whatever it may be, most of the charity that's given out is done through the church. So it makes people more charitable. It binds families together. It gives people an ideology that they can all get behind, something to believe in, a purpose in life. While feminism is just an empty void of what seems to be selfishness and what seems to be indulgence and what seems to be more like hedonism, where just do whatever makes you happy and whatever makes you pleasurable. The only problem is those are two contradicting things, because happiness comes from hardship. And that's the human condition. We try to eliminate our hardship, and we don't understand why more and more people are getting depressed. It's because we don't have a struggle. We don't have anything that requires us to have discipline, that requires us to get up every day to enforce our integrity and our will, because willpower is a muscle. And if you don't use it, it gets weakened. And I think due to the comforts that people have in America, the materialism, we've become weakened. Our will is now weakened. We don't use our willpower enough. We don't say no enough. We don't restrain ourselves from our pleasures enough. And I think that feminism is just selfish pleasure for women, really.
One of them...
There could be a difference in how it's approached.
A difference in how it's approached, but I also think that when it comes to religion, most people tend to shove the way that you act, and it's the same with feminism, don't get me wrong, but me personally, I think that one is more valid than the other. I think feminism, in a sense, is just respecting us as equal, where I think religion is putting other people down.
Because I feel like conservatives feel like a type of kind of way, and they think that is the way life is only supposed to be.
Well, what's the difference in the shame that comes from a feminist versus the shame that comes from a religious conservative? Aren't they both attempts to control and force their ways upon others?
They are.
So isn't the battle between feminists and conservatives just another religious war?
I mean, if you're going to word it like that, I guess, yes.
I mean, they're two competing ideologies, right?
I agree.
They both are beliefs, and so I understand that side, but I do think that religion is more just how somebody views, like, oh God, the higher power, one would say. But I think that the other is more of how somebody views self. Like, if I'm not being respected by a man, how am I supposed to, like, do everything that I can do just the same as a man could?
What is the purpose of the separation of church and state?
I think it's to keep religious viewpoints from becoming law. I think, it's one thing to have your beliefs and have your practices and go by that. But I think, I, in terms of the theme of the questions, that should not be what is considered normal. And I think that the reason why we separate church and state is because your religious views should not be forced upon everyone to live as their norm.
Do you think we would become a better society if people learned to be more sensitive or more thick-skinned?
Definitely more thick-skinned. I feel like now people are more sensitive. You can't say how you feel anymore. You can't have your own opinion. Everybody wants to. You have to agree with me. We have to be equal, and it's not the way. Like, bro, we're different. Everybody. First of all, this is America. This is a place full of different looking people from all over the world. That's just what it's all about. That's one. So then we should also understand that with all this difference going on, that we all have different opinions, and we need to have the strength to be like, all right, I hear you. Let's agree to disagree.
I think we need to be more sensitive, but not in a way that things irk and bug us, more so in a way that we're aware and we, aren't judgmental. We're more open to things. Maybe we don't need to push things in schools or whatever, but people need to see the world and be receptive of it. Otherwise, it's just going to breed negativity and negative upbringings, and it's just going to go right back down to hating each other, which shouldn't happen.
Do you think there would be less shame if there was less diversity? And if so, why is diversity so heavily pushed?
Yeah, I would say there'd definitely be less shame if there was less diversity, just because less diversity just means that you have people that are similar, people that think similar, and with that, you're going to have less shame because, you guys think alike, you have similarities. I think with diversity, you definitely are going to naturally have more shame because you have different viewpoints, and when you got different viewpoints, people are going to disagree. So I think the art of shame itself isn't necessarily bad, because when you have opposing views, you're going to have people that have issues with the other side. But I don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. I think the bad thing is the way and when we talk about shame, I think there's a difference between disagreeing and shaming someone. I don't think there's anything wrong with disagreeing. I think there is something wrong with shame.
How can we be promoting diversity and expect unity at the same time?
That's deep. I feel like, from growing up, my book tells me, my Bible tells me, a house divided against itself cannot stand. So I don't think that pushing diversity is really going to help anything. But I do also feel that if people did come to a common ground on God and who they're going to serve and just make that choice, and if we all came together on that, then things would be a little more peaceful. But there's a lot of differences going on, so we're going to always fight against each other. I think it's always going to be like this.
People are naturally tribalistic, and this is the end of the video. Shout out to It's Complicated. Y'all should go check him out. He does great content. I love how he deduces. He asks really good questions, almost like a lawyer, where he walks you through it, and then he kind of traps you at the end, but it's good, though. He makes really good content. You also go check him out. It's Complicated. I'll leave a link in the description down below. But what she's saying right here, I believe that people are naturally tribalistic. I think that even if I just got back from Kenya. Even though everybody there black, everybody there look like me, they think I'm Kenyan. They talking to me in Swahili, and I don't even speak Swahili. And when I tell them I'm American, they seem disappointed, as if I'm a Kenyan trying to act American, when I'm really just been born here. But what I'm trying to say is I just got back from Kenya, and they have different tribes. So they have like the Luo people. Well, that's the Luo people. What Luo? Forgive me if I'm wrong. And then there's a bunch of different ones. I don't know all of them. I think my friend's wife is Luo. But they have different tribes. So even if the people look similar or they're all black or whatever it may be, there's always going to be differences. Even if you got a white town, there's going to be some people that like the Minnesota Vikings and some people that like the Green Bay Packers, and those people are always going to go against each other. What helps with this, though, is a unifying belief system. That's why countries have always had religions, and that's why it's been important for social cohesion throughout human history, because if we all believe in at least some sort of morals and values, then we can be more trustful of each other. While in hedonism or atheism, when you don't have any direct belief system, you're more than likely just going to try to justify the things that you do as your new belief, if that makes any sense. So it just makes people less trusting of each other. But when you have something that unifies those people that have differences, it's easier to unify them totally in society. So that's one of the reasons why religion is important too. But this was a good conversation. This was a good video. Let me know in the comments below if this video was a W or an L, and give me the HBO special. That's a Help Brother Out special. Hit the like and the subscribe button for more content. Till next time.